Painting, drawing, and sculpture are visual media. But how much of visual art reflects what the artist has seen as opposed to what he or she has imagined? Artists are often placed on a spectrum, from highly naturalistic and representational to abstract, or even fully non-objective. But some artists find the notion of this spectrum irrelevant to their practice. Such an artist is my friend Richard Ranck. Dick is best known for his highly expressionistic paintings and sculptures, but who has kept up the practice of representational sketching since his art school days. Dick recently invited me to a studio sale of these small works on paper. I asked him to read his statement on the handout he gave to us visitors.
I'm hanging watercolors from my journals today for two reasons. To make them accessible to you and your own walls, if you like, and to give an idea of how I make the transition to more abstract work. In them you will find colors that appear in all my work. That happens because I begin and end each day in the tactile world, the world we all see and experience. The world amazes my eye and elates my soul. However, over the years and travels, I have become more interested in the unseen or spiritual world. This is reflected in my interest in, and sometimes wholesale appropriation of so-called primitive art. Art from Oceania, Africa, and other native cultures, whose work I find considerably more sophisticated than primitive. Faith and truth, as I sense them, are woven in. Faith in and truth of, however, are illusory.
I have been a big fan of Dick's since I saw a show of his expressionistic work at the now sadly departed Rosenfeld Gallery back in 2009. And I guess I knew that he still did some representational work, but had no idea how extensive it was.
Back at the Academy, I befriended Bo Bartlett. Bo got me started on the idea of journals. I started carrying a little watercolor set and a journal or two with me whenever I traveled. So many places I can't even think of them all. Any place I've traveled, my watercolors go with me. Since I've been married, I've been going to Maine with Brooke to a family house of hers. And I find the air and the ocean and the sky irresistible. And it's a good place to see the three of them together, dotted with islands and mountains and fir trees and all kinds of flora. And I spend 2 to 3 to 4 weeks up there a year. From there, I come back with a year's worth of work. Not necessarily a typical landscape, but certainly an idea about how to devise and divide space. And it frees me to just put things on a canvas with a certain sense of design based on the outer world that I've taken inside, and by which I mean going inside myself.
The artist that Dick mentioned earlier, Bo Bartlett, is one of the most successful PAFA graduates of recent times. He lives in Georgia now, but used to have the Bridgeport, Pennsylvania studio that his friend Dick Ranck now uses. Here are some Bo sketches of the neighborhood from back in the 1980s. The style of Bo Bartlett's work was then, and remains today, highly representational. As a student, Dick Ranck excelled in representational art, and many of the images in his travel and life painting journals show that that skill has remained. But he is clearly not defined by that skill alone anymore.
That's what I've taken from primitive work, the idea of the world we don't see. And I first started thinking about that when I was trying to understand what the nature of art was at all. Why primitive man took up a piece of chalk on a wall or made a mark in the dirt and transformed those surfaces into some kind of communication. Communication both within the tribe or the culture, but more important, to the forces of nature that were felt but they had no control over. Certainly the greatest mystery to primitive man had to be death, how a person became a cadaver. So there was all sorts of thinking that evolved from that, and art, as far as I could see, was the first form of communicating that and trying to reach some kind of compromise with those forces. And given that, that made me more interested in things religious and mythical, which again were asking the same questions, which is, what is death? What is it about? I don't think that makes me maudlin. It's just really fascinating to me. This idea of a spiritual world. For me, the more abstract work and the whimsical sculpture is me just trying to communicate with that part of myself.
I was at the doctor's.
Oh, but you're okay now? Do you have a cold?
Mm-hmm.
I do too. Is your name Tuscaloosa?
No, Tallulah.
Okay. I fear that many people in the general public believe that the only good art has a photographic level of verisimilitude. They do not know that learning to render things accurately is merely a hard-earned but teachable skill. What makes an artist good is not his or her style, but the ability to express an imaginative and compelling vision. And that is something I believe comes out clearly in all of Dick Ranck's art.